Jack White of the White Stripes just turned 50. His wife handed him his first ever smartphone because he couldn't even park his car or queue up his own music anymore. Convenience has become obligation.
Lala would go out and ask the crowd, "Can you please not raise your phones up?"
Yeah, I remember that.
And the crowd would cheer and say, "Yeah, we're on the side of that. We love that idea."
And then there was still do
But
it.
when you go to a movie theater, a symphony, church, whatever, there are all these moments in life where people put those away and engage.
Rory Sutherland, he warned us about all of this. We met at Clavio, London, where, among other things, he was ripping a fat vape and telling me how technology arrives as an option and then mutates into a mandate. When every interface funnels us down one hallway, the cost savings are obvious, but the opportunity costs stay hidden. Tonight, we trade optimism for honesty. What does marketing mean in a world where even the simplest choices are scripted? And can brands still create wonder or only compliance? I'm Philip Jackson, and this is Future Commerce. Stay with us, because sometimes to see the future of commerce, we have to mourn what modernity has left behind.
When you talk about the existential question and also the philosophical question, there is a concern I always have about technology, which is the extent to which a lot of technology arrives as an option and ends up as an obligation.
Say that again.
Okay, so one thing we've got to be alert to is that, okay, this is a bit of a banal example, but I think it's quite fitting. Let's take the parking app, which you'll all be familiar with, okay? When it first arrived, it was an alternative to a pay and display machine where you had to walk 100 yards, put some coins in or a credit card, detach a sticker, affix it to your windscreen, and generally fart around, okay? The parking app was a wonderful addition to this, just as the ticket machine was a wonderful addition to the manned ticket office at a railway station. You know, if I know what I want, if there's a queue at the manned ticket office, I can actually bypass it and use this slightly more convenient alternative, okay? And at that stage, it's all fine and dandy. Until, of course, people discover that parking apps require less maintenance and are vastly less costly than machines, and and suddenly what you find is the machines have been taken away, and the app's the only alternative. And then it becomes more stupid still, because now, there are elderly people in his 90s. My father never had a smartphone. He couldn't have, well, probably by text, he would have found it almost impossible to park anywhere, okay? Parking apps start to be used in underground car parks where there's absolutely no signal. Parking apps have an absurd system where, combined with automatic license plate recognition, you will get fined if you pay for your parking 6 minutes after you've arrived. Now, that would never have happened in a human-mediated environment, okay? So you start getting this degree of automation which is oppressive because it's no longer there as an alternative, it's suddenly an imposition. And you could argue the same, by the way, of the smartphone and indeed the mobile phone. That when you were one of the few people to have a mobile phone, it was great because nobody expected you to have one. You could do things that other people couldn't do. It gave you comparative advantage, okay? When everybody has a mobile phone and it is assumed that you have one, suddenly the balance goes from what you might call optionality to obligation. And I think this happens with a lot of technologies. And I think we need to be alert to it because something that arrives as I would take an example, okay? McDonald's, I believe, in the UK is starting to actually open outlets which are screen only. In other words, there is no option of going to a human being and actually saying, I'd like a Big Mac and fries. Or, as you might sometimes do, which a machine can't do, what have you got that's ready right now because I'm in a hurry?
Right.
Okay, I'm not that bothered about actually what I eat, I'm bothered about how quickly I can eat it. Okay, I'll have those too. Now, suddenly what you have is that the cost savings of the new interface are visible and quantifiable and immediately measurable. The opportunity cost is invisible because you can't measure the things that people aren't doing or buying because you're no longer making it possible for them to do them. And generally the lesson of retail is to be multi-channel, isn't it? The more ways you sell, the more you sell. Probably the same lesson applies to payment, by the way. The more ways you offer people to pay, the more people buy. All right? And I would say a third example would be around delivery in e-commerce, which is one of the most heinous things I think e-commerce players do, is they offer you no choice of who the delivery provider is. Right. Now, if I'm paying for delivery, a lot of people have a very strong preference for USPS, UPS, FedEx, DHL, whatever it may be. A lot of people also have a strong aversion to 2 or 3 of those entities. Let them choose. Why does that not happen? I would argue you would sell much more if you made it absolutely explicit at the beginning of the buying process that you will get to choose who delivers and when. Why doesn't it happen? Because that decision doesn't rest with marketing, doesn't rest with people who are looking for growth, it rests with procurement.
Sure.
And they say, we want to funnel everybody through this one provider with whom we've got a deal. So one, I can justify my own existence to pointing to the cost savings we managed to negotiate, okay? And 2, we'll get the maximum rebate, for which the procurement person who made the decision gets the credit. I would argue this is abominable behavior. I'm paying for delivery, right? A lot of people will not place an order because of the fear that they will suddenly then receive an email saying your X is being delivered by Y, who are known to be particularly useless in their area. And it varies by individual.
And Rory, having worked in that industry too for 20 years, I would have endless conversations with people in how to measure holdout tests and how to implement the testing of such a hypothesis too.
Do you think I'm right, by the way?
I think you're right.
Yeah. And by the way, you have to measure repeat purchase. You'd have to.
Correct.
I mean, it's not a short-term cost saving. It's a long-term relational.
The question is shouldn't even really be. I think is nobody in the process would even be asking is what's best for the customer, right? And
I think procurement never do.
If every feed looks the same, do we still call it culture, or is that just compliance? In our new 300-page book, Lore, writer Kyle Chayka, yes, the author of Filter World, joins us to expose how recommendation engines sand away the weird edges that make life vivid. He calls it algorithmic flattening, the moment that novelty is harvested for data, and it's replicated over 1 million times, and then served back to us like sanitized deja vu. And in Kyle's words, the pipe organ of culture has been tuned down to one smooth note, pleasant enough to ignore. Lore fights back. Inside, you'll find an exclusive interview with Kyle on why friction is the last luxury, essays on multiplayer brands, digital folklore, and the commerce of memory, and original art printed on inks that are refusing to fade because not everything should be optimized to disappear. Whether you're a marketer or a maker or just tired of beige feeds, Lore is your field guide to re-enchanting the marketplace. Scan the QR code on screen or tap the link below to grab your copy before the algorithm decides that you've seen enough. In the desire paths that we're seeing forming in our industry there's a really strong desire path about going to the self-service of the chat, right? And they're creating their own experiences. And that's how we started this conversation, where we just
But the feedback of the chat can be remarkably interesting because it'll reveal, rather as the call center does, the problems consumers have that they can't solve for themselves online.
Sure.
Okay, so it's the only feedback loop for where you're falling short. I mean, very clever guy.
I mean, like the AI chat, right?
But AI chat is still chat at its best level.
Right.
And by the way, it should also allow you. It should allow you the option to request a human, because otherwise you could get stuck in an endless loop of mutual incomprehension.
Yeah.
If your query or your problem was slightly out of the ordinary and outside its training set, you have to give people the option of the human. Just as I think at McDonald's, I'm an enthusiastic of on-screen ordering. I hate queuing, but there will be occasions for me, and there will be people of different temperaments who want a conversation, and what we're failing to realize, unless you have some sort of free chat mechanism, is that there's a whole form of customer feedback which the online world never captures because you never anticipated the problem in the first place. Amazon, interestingly, I think one of the most admirable things they do is the call me back button. If you've got a problem,
Right.
you're logged in, you identify the item with which you had a problem, you identify the nature of the problem, you hit call me back, and about 3 seconds later your phone rings. You don't have to go through any of that identity stuff, okay, because they know who you are already and they know what your problem is. You get straight into the gist of the issue. The most peculiar thing to me is that I don't know a single other business that's actually copied that. And they say to me when I recommend it, they say, oh, we can't do the cost benefit analysis. And I go, that's already been done. Amazon tests everything, okay? Amazon wouldn't have kept this thing alive for 7 years unless they had some evidence of knowing that it worked, okay? Just steal it. But no. The burden of proof of marketing is far too... Marketing is in a very, very unfortunate position, okay, where it's held accountable for every single unit of cost that it incurs, but it is completely inadequately credited for the value it creates. Okay, so we have this strange world of accountability, which doesn't mean overall accountability in the sense that a hedge fund or a VC or a pharmaceutical research entity would understand it, which is overall, do we have more breakthrough successes than the cost of activity?